In Defense of Food, An Eater's Manifesto by Michael Pollan. Picture this: 10 middle-aged people, bodies tired and struggling with diabetes, living in a modern town and eating what most of us eat every day: flour, sugar, cheap meat, and soda. Their health is spiraling downward. Then a scientist makes an unusual proposal. What if they could reverse time, not with some fancy machine, but by taking a journey? The group agrees and leaves everything behind, heading deep into the Australian bush to live like their ancestors did. For 7 weeks, there are no supermarkets, no packaged foods, no nutrition labels. They survive entirely on what the land offers: hunting kangaroo, gathering yams, catching seafood and crocodiles. They're eating exactly how their people ate for thousands of years. When those 7 weeks end, scientist Karen O'Dea tests their blood again. The results? Absolutely stunning. Every marker of their diabetes had either disappeared or dramatically improved. Blood pressure dropped. Their bodies were healing themselves. No pills, no modern medicine, just a complete shift in what they ate. They had escaped what we're calling the Western diet. This isn't just about 10 people in Australia. It's about all of us. We're living in a massive, uncontrolled experiment. We're the subjects, and the experiment is our modern food world. The results come in daily through climbing obesity rates, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. That's why we're diving into this book today. In Defense of Food by Michael Pollan isn't just any book. It's a manifesto. Millions of copies sold, fundamentally changing how people think about their plates. Pollan noticed the same confusion we all feel. The advice never stops changing. Fat is evil one day, carbs the next. Eat more of this, less of that. Yet we're getting sicker and heavier. He cut through the noise to find a simple truth, captured in just 7 words. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. That's it, the secret. Now you might be thinking, that's too simple. And you're right, it is simple. But understanding what those 7 words truly mean in our modern world, that's the key to unlocking lifelong health and genuine pleasure in eating. By the end of our time together, you'll understand the powerful truth behind that simple sentence. You'll see the invisible ideology shaping your food choices without you knowing it, and you'll have a clear path to escape the confusion and reclaim your health, one meal at a time. Let's dive in. So how did we reach a point where eat food sounds revolutionary? What else would we eat? That's exactly the problem. Michael Pollan argues that much of what fills our supermarket shelves today isn't strictly food at all. They're what he calls edible food-like substances. To understand the difference, we need to grasp an idea that's quietly taken over our minds and kitchens. He names this idea nutritionism. This is the book's most crucial concept, so let it really sink in. Nutritionism isn't the same as nutrition. Nutrition is the science of how food affects our bodies. Nutritionism is an ideology, a set of unquestioned assumptions about food that dominates our thinking. This ideology holds 3 core beliefs. First, food's most important parts are the nutrients. We're taught to think of an apple not as an apple, but as a collection of vitamin C, fiber, and fructose. The actual food is just a delivery system for invisible chemicals. Second, because these nutrients are invisible and mysterious, we need experts to tell us how to eat. Suddenly, you need scientists, journalists, or government pyramids to navigate the simple act of eating. Your mother's or grandmother's authority, tradition itself, gets replaced by the authority of the lab coat. Third, eating's entire purpose gets reduced to one goal: promoting physical health. Food stops being about pleasure, community, family, or culture. It becomes a biological chore, medicine we must take to avoid disease. This ideology didn't just appear. Pollan traces it to a specific moment in American history. In 1977, a Senate committee led by George McGovern investigated alarming rises in diet-related diseases like heart disease and cancer. Their staff, lawyers and journalists, not scientists, created a straightforward report with simple, food-based advice like reduce consumption of meat. The meat and dairy industries went ballistic. Political pressure was so intense, the committee retreated and rewrote the guidelines. Everything changed in that rewriting. Simple advice to eat less meat transformed into scientific-sounding jargon. Choose meats, poultry, and fish that will reduce saturated fat intake. See the shift. Suddenly, the conversation moved away from real, tangible foods like steak or cheese to an invisible, politically harmless substance called saturated fat. The actual food got let off the hook. This was huge for the food industry. They can't easily sell you less food, but they can absolutely sell you new foods engineered to have less of the bad nutrient and more of the good one. Just like that, the age of nutritionism was born. Supermarket shelves began changing. Where you once saw food names, you now saw nutrient claims. Low fat, high fiber, no cholesterol. The message was clear. Real food was old-fashioned and unscientific. The future belonged to new, engineered products, optimized by food science. This thinking is a dream for processed food manufacturers. It lets them take cheap, raw materials, mostly corn, wheat, and soy, break them into chemical parts, then reassemble them into products marketed as healthier than real food. The ultimate example? Margarine. It started as a cheap butter substitute, but when the war on saturated fat began, it got brilliantly repositioned. It was butter, but smarter. The bad stuff, saturated fat and cholesterol, was removed. The good stuff, polyunsaturated fats and vitamins, was added. Of course, there was a catch. The process making vegetable oil solid, hydrogenation, created a new industrial fat called trans fat. We now know trans fat is far more dangerous than the saturated fat it replaced. But here's the magic of processed food. When that embarrassing news emerged, the industry didn't pull margarine from shelves. They just re-engineered it. Now with no trans fats, the product adapts, the ideology marches on, and countless people who followed expert advice suffered the consequences. This focus on single nutrients creates nutritional whiplash. The history of nutritionism is macronutrients at war. For decades, fat was the villain, and carbohydrates were heroes. We were told to replace dietary fat with carbs. So the food industry rolled out endless low-fat products. Snackwell's cookies, low-fat yogurt, pastas and breads, often loaded with refined flour and sugar to compensate for missing fat. What was the result of this grand 30-year national low-fat eating experiment? We didn't get healthier. We got fatter and sicker. Many experts date our modern obesity and diabetes epidemics to the late 1970s, precisely when we started following this advice. Pollan calls the low-fat campaign nutritionism's supreme test and its most complete failure. The problem is, this entire ideology rests on shaky scientific foundations. Science tools work best studying one variable at a time, but food isn't a single variable. A carrot is a complex chemical wilderness. A single thyme leaf contains dozens of different antioxidants. When scientists isolate one active ingredient, like beta-carotene from that carrot, and put it in a pill, it often doesn't work. Some studies showed beta-carotene supplements actually increased certain cancer risks. Why? because the nutrient was removed from the food's context. The whole food might be more than the sum of its parts. The fiber in the carrot, or one of hundreds of other compounds, might be necessary for beta-carotene to work its magic. Science simply doesn't know. As Pollan says, the great thing about eating foods as compared with nutrients, you don't need to fathom a carrot's complexity in order to reap its benefits. This flawed, reductionist science, amplified by journalism seeking simple headlines and exploited by an industry seeking marketing angles, has led us into total confusion and anxiety. We've become a nation of what one doctor calls orthorexics, people with an unhealthy obsession with healthy eating. Here's the great American paradox. No people on earth worry more about their food choices, health consequences, yet no people suffer from as many diet-related health problems. So if nutritionism is the problem, what's the real villain it's distracting us from? Pollan calls it the elephant in the room, the Western diet. For over a century, intrepid doctors and dentists stationed in remote parts of the world noticed a strange pattern. Working with native populations eating traditional diets, whether Inuit in the Arctic eating mostly meat and fat, or African tribes eating grains and vegetables, they found almost complete absence of our modern chronic diseases. No heart disease, diabetes, cancer, obesity, not even tooth decay. But as soon as these populations abandoned traditional ways and adopted modern Western foods, what they called store food, a predictable wave of diseases followed. First came obesity, then diabetes, then heart disease and cancer, often in that exact order. One pioneer was a Cleveland dentist named Weston A. Price. In the 1930s, he traveled the world visiting a dozen isolated cultures, from Swiss mountaineers to Australian aborigines. He meticulously documented their perfect teeth and robust health, collecting food samples. He found these cultures thrived on an incredible variety of diets, some high-fat, some low-fat, some all meat, some mostly plants. What this proved to Price was the human body's incredible adaptability. We can be healthy on many different diets, but the one diet we don't seem adapted to, the Western diet. So what is this diet really? What connects the bread, soda, fast food burgers, and breakfast cereals? Pollan argues food industrialization has led to 5 fundamental transformations. First, a shift from whole foods to refined foods. Think about turning a wheat kernel into white flour. The most nutritious parts, the bran and germ containing fiber, healthy oils, and B vitamins, get stripped away to improve shelf life and create soft, pleasing texture. What remains is nutritionally empty starch. Our body digests almost as quickly as pure sugar. This captures modern food processing in a nutshell. A relentless drive to deliver energy as glucose and fructose to our bodies as quickly and efficiently as possible. Second, a shift from complexity to simplicity. This happens at every level. Our soils are simplified, fed just 3 chemical nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, instead of the complex web of life in healthy organic soil. This simplified soil grows simplified plants, shown to be less nutritious than 50 years ago. Our diet itself has become drastically simplified. Out of 80,000 edible species on Earth, the modern food system is built almost entirely on 4 crops: corn, soy, wheat, and rice. They provide 2/3 of our calories. Third, a shift from quality to quantity. Our food system is designed to produce maximum calories as cheaply as possible. Since the 1980s, American farms have produced 600 more calories per person per day, but simultaneously, that food's nutritional quality has declined. You'd need to eat 3 apples today to get the same iron as a single 1940 apple. This has created a new type of human never before seen in history, the person who is both overfed and undernourished. Fourth, this is huge, a shift from leaves to seeds. This applies to us and the animals we eat. For most of history, our diet and our livestock's diet was based on green plants, but the industrial system is built on seeds, corn, soy, and wheat. This has caused a massive, unseen change in our food's chemistry. Leaves and seeds contain two different essential fats, omega-3s and omega-6s. Think of omega-3s, plentiful in leaves, as flexible and fast. They're critical for brain health and calming inflammation. Think of omega-6s, concentrated in seeds, as sturdy and slow. They're important for storing energy and mounting inflammatory responses when injured. Both are essential, but their ratio matters. For most of human history, that ratio was about 1-to-1, maybe 3-to-1 omega-6s to omega-3s. Today, in the Western diet, that ratio is more than 10-to-1, sometimes as high as 20-to-1. This imbalance, too many omega-6s, not enough omega-3s, is now believed to be a major driver of chronic diseases associated with the Western diet, from heart disease to diabetes, and possibly even depression. We've unknowingly engineered a fundamental nutrient out of our food chain. Finally, the fifth transformation, a shift from food culture to food science. Before nutritionism, what guided our eating choices? Culture, your family, your region, your traditions. These food cultures are reservoirs of accumulated wisdom, the result of thousands of years of trial and error, figuring out how to eat well in a particular place. In Latin America, for example, corn is traditionally eaten with beans. Why? Because corn lacks an essential amino acid that beans have, and vice versa. Together, they make a complete protein. Corn is also traditionally soaked with limestone, which releases a B vitamin that, if absent, causes the disease pellagra. When Europeans first adopted corn without its accompanying food culture, they got sick. The culture knew something science would take centuries to figure out. The modern Western diet, with its marketing, fads, and scientific experts, systematically undermines these traditional cultures, leaving us lost and confused. So there you have it. That's the Western diet. A diet of refined, simplified, nutrient-poor foods built on a handful of seeds that has displaced cultural wisdom with scientific ideology. No surprise, it's making us sick. The question becomes, how do we escape? How do we find our way back to real food in this treacherous environment? This is where Pollan's book becomes a practical, empowering guide. He unpacks his 7-word mantra into a series of simple, elegant rules of thumb. These aren't complicated prescriptions. They're more like mental filters to help you navigate the supermarket and dinner table. Let's start with the first rule. Eat food. He offers a simple test. Don't eat anything your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. Imagine walking through the supermarket with her. She'd see the apples, carrots, fish. But what would she make of a Go-Gurt portable yogurt tube? Is it food or toothpaste? Reading the label with its long list of modified cornstarch, artificial flavors, and chemical preservatives, she'd know for sure it's not the simple cultured milk she knew as yogurt. This one simple rule can eliminate thousands of those food-like substances from your cart. Another filter. Avoid food products containing ingredients that are unfamiliar, unpronounceable, more than 5 in number, or that include high fructose corn syrup. Again, not because an ingredient like ethoxylated monoglyceride is necessarily poison, but it's a reliable marker you're holding a highly processed product, not food. Real food doesn't need a long ingredient list. Here's a powerful one that might sound counterintuitive. Avoid food products that make health claims. Why? Because real foods like apples and carrots generally don't have packages to print claims on. The silence of the yams isn't a sign they have nothing to say about health. Health claims are a feature of the processed food industry, a nutritionism tool used to sell you a product. Remember, margarine was one of the first foods boasting about being healthier for your heart. To follow these rules, Pollan suggests a simple supermarket strategy: shop the store's periphery and stay out of the middle. The outer walls are where fresh foods usually are: produce, meat, dairy, fish. The center aisles are the domain of processed, packaged goods. Even better, he says, get out of the supermarket altogether when possible. Visit a farmer's market. Join a CSA, which is a subscription to a local farm. Or plant a small garden. In these places you won't find high-fructose corn syrup or health claims. You'll find fresh, whole foods picked at their peak of flavor and nutrition. You get to shake the hand that feeds you, restoring the trust and accountability relationship that the long industrial food chain has broken. So that's how we eat food. Now for the second rule: mostly plants. This, Pollan says, is the one point of universal agreement among nutrition experts. A diet rich in vegetables and fruits reduces risk of all Western diseases. This is likely because of the antioxidants, fiber, omega-3s, and thousands of other compounds in plants that work in ways we don't fully understand. He specifies eating leaves especially, because leaves are where the most protective nutrients concentrate, while seeds like grains and beans are primarily energy storage devices, higher in calories and omega-6s. This doesn't mean becoming vegetarian. Humans have been eating meat for a very long time, and it's nutritious food. But we eat it in historically unprecedented quantities, around 200 pounds per person per year in America. He suggests following Thomas Jefferson's advice: use meat as a, quote, condiment for the vegetables, not the main course. When you do eat animal products, follow another brilliant rule: you are what you eat eats too. The diet of animals we eat profoundly affects their meat, milk, and eggs quality. A cow is a ruminant, evolved to eat grass. When we feed it grain in a feedlot, its meat changes. It becomes higher in saturated fat and omega-6s, lower in omega-3s and other vitamins. The same is true for chickens and pigs. A pastured egg with its bright orange yolk is completely different food from a pale industrial egg. So the rule to eat more leaves and fewer seeds applies to our animal friends as well. Finally, we reach the third, perhaps most challenging rule: not too much. The scientific case for eating less is overwhelming. Calorie restriction is one of the most powerful links ever found between diet and disease prevention like cancer. But simply telling ourselves to eat less in our food environment is incredibly difficult. This is where we must look to food culture, the part nutritionism completely ignores. Pollan examines the so-called French paradox: how the French eat all that rich food and stay slimmer and healthier than Americans. The answer isn't some magic bullet in red wine or foie gras, it's in how they eat. They eat small portions and don't take seconds. They rarely snack. They eat meals together at a table, and they spend far more time enjoying their food than we do. They get more pleasure from fewer calories. This leads to Pollan's most radical advice: pay more, eat less. Our food system is built on making calories cheap and abundant. Better food, grown with care, in healthy soil, without chemicals, simply costs more. But by choosing to spend a bit more on quality food, we accomplish two things. First, we support a healthier food chain. Second, we naturally tend to eat less. When food is more expensive, we're less likely to waste it or overconsume it. And because high-quality food is more flavorful and satisfying, we don't need as much to feel full and content. To help us eat less, he suggests restoring the institution of the meal, Try doing all your eating at a table. A desk is not a table. Your car is definitely not a table. Don't eat alone if you can help it. Eating isn't just about fueling our bodies. It's about building community and culture. Finally, learn to consult your gut. Americans often stop eating because of external cues. The plate is empty. The bag is finished. The TV show is over. Other cultures, like the Okinawans, follow a rule called Hara Hachi Bu, eat until you're 80% full. This requires eating slowly, paying attention, and listening to our body's internal satiety signals, skills lost in fast food culture. In the end, all these rules point to one final, powerful act: to cook, and if you can, plant a garden. When you cook from scratch, you reclaim control over your food from corporations and food scientists. You know exactly what's in your meal. There's no high-fructose corn syrup or partially hydrogenated oil because you didn't put it there. When you grow even a little of your own food, something deeper changes. You reconnect with the simple miracle that food isn't a product of industry, but of nature. You see it not as a pile of nutrients, but as a web of relationships between sun, soil, plants, and yourself. In the garden and kitchen, health isn't something you worry about or calculate. It's simply a gift of eating real food well. As we reach the end of our journey through In Defense of Food, I want to step back and reflect on what I believe is the book's most powerful and enduring lesson. This isn't just a diet book. In fact, it's an anti-diet book. It's a profound critique of how we've allowed our relationship with one of life's greatest pleasures to become a source of anxiety, confusion, and sickness. The core message is liberation, freeing ourselves from an ideology, nutritionism, that has served the food industry's interests far more than our own health. Pollan shows us that endless debates about fat versus carbs, or this nutrient versus that one, are ultimately distractions. They keep us focused on microscopic details, so we miss the big picture: the systematic degradation of our food supply and erosion of our food cultures. The problem isn't a single nutrient. The problem is the industrial food system itself. The problem is the Western diet. What makes this book brilliant is it doesn't leave us in despair. It hands us a way out, and that way out isn't a complicated new set of scientific rules. It's a return to something much older and wiser: tradition, common sense, and the evidence of our own senses. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. This simple mantra is a tool for disengaging from the noise. It empowers you to walk into a supermarket, a place designed to confuse and manipulate you, and see with perfect clarity what is food and what is merely an industrial product. It restores the authority of your own judgment. The most important shift this book encourages is one of perspective. It asks us to see eating not as purely biological, but as ecological and cultural. The rule, "you are what you eat eats," connects your personal health directly to a farm animal's health, and in turn, to soil health. It reminds us we're part of a food chain, and that chain's health is indivisible. When we choose to buy food from a local farmer, we're not just making a healthier choice for ourselves. We're casting a vote for a healthier, more sustainable world. So how can you start applying these ideas today in simple, practical ways? I'd suggest 3 small experiments. First, next time you go grocery shopping, try using the great-grandmother rule. As you put items in your cart, just ask yourself, would she recognize this as food? See what happens. See what stays on the shelf. Second, commit to eating just one meal this week at a table, with other people if possible, and with no screens. No phone, no TV, just the food and the company. Try eating a little more slowly than you normally would. Pay attention to the taste and texture of the food. See how you feel afterward. Third, find a local farmer's market this weekend. You don't even have to buy anything, just walk through it. Talk to a farmer. Observe the colors and smells of truly fresh food. See what it feels like to shorten the food chain. These small acts are the beginning of a revolution. They're acts of defiance against a food system that wants us passive, confused, and sick. By taking back control of our food, we take back control of our health and, in a small but meaningful way, the planet's health. That was a deep dive into In Defense of Food by Michael Pollan. We've covered the core ideas today, but I have to be honest. A summary, no matter how detailed, is just the trailer. The real movie, the real transformation, happens when you sit down with the book yourself. It's in the quiet moments when one of Pollan's stories or a particular phrase connects with your own life in an unexpected way. This podcast is designed to help you decide if this book deserves your time. If anything we've talked about has sparked your curiosity or resonated with a feeling you've had about our crazy food world, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning information. It's an experience that can genuinely change your relationship with food for the better. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable and it gave you some clarity, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.